This is called a queenside pawn majority. There's 3 against 2 on the queen side. And for most people, that might not look like much. What are you going to do with an extra pawn over here? But actually, in the hands of a good player like Capablanca, a world champion, this is enough to win the game. And the way you win is actually easier than you might think. And I think you guys should really pay attention to this, because if you look at your games, you're going to notice that something like this, where you have a section of the board where you have a pawn majority, is very, very common. And if you know how to use that to your advantage, you're going to be able to win a lot more games. Okay? This is game number 30 in a series where we're going through this book, Logical Chess, move by move. We're almost done, and this is a very, very nice game that illustrates how chess can really be simple if you know what to look at and what to focus on. Okay, quick reminder, my course Breaking 1500 is opened again, and today there's like a special sale going on. It ends today, so check out the link in the description if you want to take advantage of that. A lot of people are already enrolled in that, and it's been nice to catch up with you guys in there and see all of the success stories really from people who have been improving. So check that out. Let's go ahead and jump right into this game. So Capablanca starts out by developing his pieces. You'll notice he does block his bishop, but he blocks his bishop, but he has a very clear plan for this. He's going to fianchetto it over here later. And as long as you do have a plan, it's okay to break the principles in chess. And that's what's going on here. So black plays c6, bishop comes out, Capablanca attacks the center, black defends. Both players are developing their pieces, following the principle of trying not to move pieces multiple times in the opening. I say that until right here, where black kind of breaks the principle. Now, there's a reason why they didn't just castle right away. If you guys would like to pause, what do you think Capablanca might have played if his opponent had castled in this position? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, there's a number of moves that could have been played. Maybe he was just going to get his bishop out. That's totally fine. But the move knight to e5 is actually very powerful. And the reason is because normally when you bring your knight to the center like this, your opponent's going to want to take it and trade it off, right, to get rid of that annoying piece. But if they do that now, notice the knight is attacked. And once it moves somewhere, the queen and bishop battery can take on h7 with check. And now black's king is going to be exposed. This is not ideal for the black king. So because of that, you can't really take the knight. Probably don't want to lose the bishop pair. You probably have to go back. And then f4, white gets, a nice grip on e5. You could probably play f5, open up the f file. You get a very nice aggressive attacking position. And I think that is why, going back here, black decided, no, I don't want to castle. I'm going to play bishop h5 and get rid of this annoying battery. Okay? So bishop h5. All right, so we have b3. This is what I was talking about. He doesn't leave this bad bishop just sitting here. He fianchettos it on the other side of the board here and gets it into the game. Bishop to b2, and black does trade. Now, black spent quite a few moves with this bishop. To g4, to h5, to g6, to d3. That's 4 moves with the same piece. So what you'll notice about the position is that Capablanca has control of the center. He is castled, and he has all 3 pieces and the queen developed. The rooks are connected, and black still has some work to do, right? Black's going to need to castle and move the queen a little bit behind, okay? And so usually you want to strike at the center and open things up in positions like this. But does Capablanca play e4 right here? The answer is no. He first brings the rook over so that it's in a good position to support after e4 is played. Okay, so this is a key point. Don't just rush into an attack. Make sure you have all your pieces positioned in nice squares before you kind of break open the center. So black plays queen c7, and now Capablanca plays e4, which the general principle is that when you open up the center, it's going to benefit the person who is better developed. Now, you could argue that the development is relatively equal, but white does have this extra rook lined up and ready to go, and black does not. So it's a small thing, but it's still something. So black captures, Capablanca captures. Black tries to trade to free up his position a little bit. And now, how do you think Capablanca recaptured? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, he actually took with the rook. And I believe he was anticipating the move knight to f6, where he would meet it with rook to h4 and create this very powerful checkmate threat, and probably plan to follow that up with d5 to get rid of the defender by taking this knight. And this is not going to be easy for black to deal with, okay? Because every time you move pawns, you create weaknesses that he could then take advantage of in the future. So that was probably going to be his plan. So he took with the rook. If you take with the queen, and then the knight comes here, you could still put your queen there, but it's not really that powerful because you don't have a piece to support it at the moment, and your rook's kind of just sitting here. So that's why he took with the rook. Now, black didn't want to allow that and played the move bishop to f6 instead, keeping the bishop controlling that square so that the rook can't come over and put pressure on h7. Now, I want you guys to pause and answer the question, what did black threaten by playing the move bishop to f6? We had a chance to look at that. Obviously, this is not a threat. I mean, that is defended 1, 2, 3, 4 times. But there was a sneaky threat of knight to c5. So, for example, if white just plays a random rook move, knight to c5 is going to happen. It's a fork on these pieces, so you kind of have to take the knight. Otherwise, you're just losing the material there. But once you take it, black gets rid of that bishop. So now they have the bishop against the knight, and they've caused you to double up your pawns. So you have, even though you have 4 pawns against 3, it's hard to make use of these because they're doubled. And now black is the one who has the majority here, 4 against 3 here. This is actually a better position for black. So sneaky little tactic there. And usually what I like to do is whenever somebody moves a piece, especially a long-range piece like a rook, a bishop, or a queen, you want to ask yourself, did they line up with anything, even if there's pieces in between, right? And in this case, yes, they lined up with my bishop. Even though there is a pawn here, I still need to pay attention to the fact that this is here, and you might notice the move knight c5, that there's a pin on this pawn, right? So I think a lot of people would miss this, and it's important to be on your toes and be alert for situations like that. So Capablanca obviously notices that and plays the move queen to e3, because now if the knight were to go to c5, there is no longer a fork, right? And he can simply move his rook away and the game continues, something like rook g4, and I don't know what's going to happen, but there's no fork. So queen e3, black plays c5, trying to strike at the center. Capablanca plays the move knight to e5, and there is an amazing concept here, which is, I think a lot of people might miss, but he's a world champion for a reason. So black captures. What move do you think Capablanca played here? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is the amazing knight takes d7. Now, it's amazing because you'll notice his queen is under attack. And if he doesn't do this, and he simply, let's just say, takes the pawn back, black's going to be able to just trade a bunch of stuff. Takes, 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 takes. And then black's going to be the one who gets control of the file, which usually is not a good sign, okay? Because then you're going to have to constantly try to figure out ways to fight back for that file. And if they're able to invade, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So he probably planned this when he played knight to e5. I mean, I'm sure he did. But his intention was never to recapture the pawn, okay? So the move is this. Knight takes d7, sacrificing the queen. Now, if you guys would like to pause, black didn't do this. They didn't capture. They captured the knight. But if they would have taken the queen, what is the move that Capablanca was going to play, and what was the follow-up going to be? Go ahead and pause and try to calculate some of these lines. All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight takes f6 check. And the first thing that you need to understand about this is that if you capture, you are now going to be getting checkmated with rook to g4, forces the king in the corner, and then that bishop comes in and delivers the checkmate, which is pretty nice, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is that if the king says, well, I don't have to take, I'll just move, there's rook to h4 threatening checkmate again. This is a really nice checkmate pattern with the rook and the knight in the corner. And so now, okay, what if they take? Guess what? Check and checkmate again. You see this rook and bishop is very, very powerful when the king is stuck like this and can't escape, okay? And then the only other thing black could have tried would have been h6. And if you'd like to pause, what's the follow-up here for white? If you have a chance to look at that, it's rook takes h6 check. Only move is for black to capture, and they've lined up on the with the bishop there for the discover check, and now knight to d5 check. King moves somewhere, and then they take the queen, and you actually have the knight and the bishop against the rook. This is a good position for white. It gets a little bit tricky because this pawn is pushing down, and then black's going to try to sneak in with the rook, but you could simply play something like f3 and use your king to support, and you're actually just fine. The bishop can go to c3 if you need to, and over time, the knight and the bishop are going to be better than the rook, okay? So there was a lot there, but that was Capablanca's plan. Now, this is important. It's something he mentions in the book. A lot of times what really strong players will do is they have a positional idea in mind, okay? And the positional idea has to do with the 3 against 2 pawn majority, which we're going to get to in just a second. But the only way to make this work is to be on the lookout for these little tactics that help you with your positional objective. So he kind of sets this little trap of like, go ahead, take my queen if you want to, knowing full well that black probably wasn't going to fall for it, which they didn't. But now when he captures this pawn back, look what happens. Who has control of the open file now? Capablanca does, right? Remember earlier in the line that we looked at, just to refresh your memory, if Capablanca would have simply taken and we got this trade, everybody trades, black is the one who gets control of the file, right? Going back to the game, Capablanca gets control of the file. It's a very subtle thing, but that super complicated fancy tactic was the reason he was able to get this, and now he's the one who has control of the file. It's the small things that make a big difference, okay? So of course, he doubles up on the open file immediately, really putting the pressure, threatening to invade, and black doesn't have a lot of options here. They have to fight back for that file. All right, so question for you guys to pause and test yourself. Is there a tactic available for white that starts with the move rook takes d8? What do you think? Well, the answer is yes and no. There is a tactic, takes, and you can grab a free pawn, but then you get checkmated, right? So hopefully you didn't fall for that. You always have to be paying attention to the back rank when you castle like this, and there's no escape square for the king. Remember, early in the game, you don't want to move these pawns because they create weaknesses. But towards the end of the game, that can actually be a disadvantage if you're not careful, and so you have to watch out for stuff like that. So absolutely not. You should not take that and not go for the pawn. So what does Capablanca do instead? He focuses on the queenside majority. This is all he needs to win the game, and you're going to see exactly how he does that. Plays the move b4. Okay, he just starts pushing the pawns. This is something to remember. When you have an advantage somewhere on the board, usually at the right moment, you need to look to push the pawns. Okay, notice he's got control of the open file, so he's not giving up any weaknesses by doing this. He starts to push the pawns. So black takes, and Capablanca takes with the queen. He's keeping the battery so to make sure that black's not going to be able to go there and fight for the file. Black plays b6. He wants to not have to worry about the pawn on a7. And now Capablanca just plays a simple move, g3. All those back rank mate ideas that we were talking about, he doesn't want to have to worry about them. So he just fixed that. Now his king can just move up, okay? Key point, always watch out for the back rank, especially as you get towards the end of the game. The rook comes over, attacks the pawn. So he defends, right? Nothing fancy here. Now you will notice that he gives up the d file in doing so. But he's positioning this rook behind this pawn, and you're going to see why that's so important as the game goes on. Moves the queen out of the way. Black tries to bring the king over because he recognizes that, okay, there's 3 against 2. There's going to be a passed pawn here at some point. I probably need my king to help support that. c5, pushes the pawn. Takes. And here is, I would say, a very high-level move. Okay, what do you think Capablanca played? Got a chance to look at that. He plays queen e4. I'm pretty sure everybody, 9 out of 10 people are going to just take this with the pawn immediately. The reason he doesn't is because then black's going to go queen c6, and now they have a nice blockade here. They're controlling this diagonal. You can't move it forward. You have to watch out for rook d5, and then the pressure is going to just be on the pawn. So Capablanca says, let me go here first. I'll get control of that key diagonal. I'm not worried about this pawn going anywhere because you can't take me. Lose your queen. If you push, I can just take. So I've got time to do this. He's also eyeing here, maybe in some cases that could be a threat. Rook to d5. Stops control. He's trying to make sure he can get this blockade on the c6 square. All right, so white to play, and I have a question for you guys. Should Capablanca take the pawn on h7, yes or no? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the answer is no. And yes, he could take it and eventually go check and probably get another pawn over here, but he kind of abandons his plan of controlling this section of the board, getting this passed pawn, and after a move like, for example, queen d6, let's say check, you get that pawn, look what's going to happen. Rook to d1 check, black's queen invades, and all of a sudden, black is actually the one who has the better position. They could, first of all, go back and forth if they want. Even just taking here, I mean, this is not a good position for white. Like your pass pawn over here on the H file doesn't really mean anything, right? So, of course, he did not do that. He did not get sidetracked by that. He stuck with the plan, right? He stuck with the plan. He captured here, okay? Now, it looks to me like this is only defended 1 time and it's attacked 2 times. What am I missing? Well, hopefully you said if the rook takes, there's going to be queen to b4, which is a pin, and now there's 2 attackers and only 1 defender, and black can resign because they lose their rook. Okay, so again, we see the tactics support the positional thing that Capablanca is trying to do. He's trying to get a pass pawn and push it, but there's these little tactics that keep popping up that make sure that this is possible. All right, so we have g6, and now Capablanca at this point pushes the pawn again to c6. And by the way, rooks should go behind pass pawns because they constantly support the pawn all the way to the queening square. That's exactly what we were seeing here. So black plays king g7, and I think what they realized was that, you know what, initially I was going to bring my king over to try to help this, but watch what happens after, for example, something like this. Check, check, checkmate. Just as an example of what could happen. If you really try to bring the king over, it's just too dangerous for the king, okay? And so because of that, they decided, you know what, I better just put my king somewhere over here. And now Capablanca plays a move which I think a lot of people might have a hard time understanding, but let me try to explain it. So he plays a4. The idea is this. If he goes for queen b4 to sneak down here, this is kind of the normal route that you would take. You're just going to force the queen to move and then push it and get a queen. Let's just say, for example, black does something like this. You sneak in, they trade, you have the pawn ready to go, but wait a second, rook to b5, and now you have a problem. Because now black's rook is the one behind the pawn. You can't go there anymore. And the only thing you could do is go rook c7 to hold on to your pawn. But what happens now is your rook is stuck guarding the pawn. If you ever move the rook off the 7th rank, you just lose your pawn. If you ever push the pawn, you lose your pawn. So both of these pieces end up being tied up. And this is not really the ideal situation for white. You're going to have a hard time making progress in a position like this, okay? So Capablanca knows that, he sees that, and he says, you know what? Let me play a4 so that this idea never happens. So now, if I want to come over here and do this, I can. And then black's not going to be able to go there because I've used my pawn. Okay, so very, very clever idea there. So black says, all right, let me go here and just get ready to take this pawn. If you try queen b4 now, I'm just going to take your pawn. So what did Capablanca do here? If you had a chance to look at that, I hope you were paying attention because this was a beautiful moment in the game, and I think a lot of people could easily miss this. If you just said some random move like move your king or, you know, push a pawn or something, you would have missed a beautiful finish to the game. The move was queen to e5 check. And at first glance, it's like, okay, what does that do? f6? Well, you take the rook. Because guess what? Once that queen leaves, there is no stopping this guy from becoming a queen. There's really nothing that the queen can do. Yeah, you can try to come down here and attack me. Doesn't matter because once I get the queen, everything is defended. You can't blockade because queens don't move like that. And if you go here and take the queen, guess what? Capablanca still has the extra rook. Fantastic game. And it all started with that queenside majority. He pushed the pawns, created the pass pawn, and then was paying attention for this tactic at the end to finish off the game. Okay, and you can see just how dangerous passed pawns are with rooks behind them. And yeah, that's it. Chess can really be simple when you think about it. This game boiled down to he had 3 against 2, he pushed him, and he won the game. Like that was it. Yes, there were some complicated tactics along the way, of course, but really it's not that complicated. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll see you next time for game 31, which is on page 224. As always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.